Go Vegan Radio with Bob Linden at goveganradio.com, on Twitter at Go Vegan Radio, and Facebook, Go Vegan Radio with Bob Linden. And today we have another interesting discussion, I predict, with Wayne Hsiung, founder of Direct Action Everywhere, and Gary Francione. And some months back we had a rather interesting discussion going on, and I'm very interested in where animal activism has been, where it is, and where it's going. I'm quite upset with what portrays itself as an animal rights movement. Most of the headliners at the so-called Animal Rights Conference, I feel, are industry collaborators, and we can see that with what's happening in California now with the Prevent Cruelty resolution that prevents no cruelty whatsoever. So there's so much deception that goes on, so much corruption, and you know what I have come to conclude is that the most important activism is vegan advocacy. Now, I don't really see vegan advocacy happening with Direct Action Everywhere, but Direct Action Everywhere, DXE, is getting a lot of attention. A huge article that was in The Intercept with Glenn Greenwald, and then there were disruptions at Dodger, San Francisco, LA Dodger, San Francisco Giant games, and at political rallies, Bernie Sanders rallies, and Hillary Clinton rallies, and all of which I'd like to discuss. I actually, just in thinking about what we might discuss today, I just jotted down a bunch of notes, and I might just, go into that just a little bit here, and then say that maybe we'll get back to what I'm mentioning here, but I'll have Gary jump in. I know he's interested in talking to you, Wayne, also. And, we have Gary on every week doing commentary, and he is, of course, a renowned law professor at Rutgers University. I guess we should mention, Wayne, your background a little bit, that you also have a law degree and you've taught law. Tell us a bit about your law history and your educational background.
Well, I have to confess, I'm not nearly as accomplished as Gary. I tried to be a law professor and failed, unfortunately. But I did my best, and I learned a lot from Gary in the process. Gary was one of the people I consider a mentor, intellectually and in person. I met him a few times at the University of Chicago Law School, where I was in law school. But I went to law school because I wanted to do great work for animals. And if I had read Gary's work before I went to law school, I might have known that maybe law school wasn't the best route for me to take. But in law school, I did learn from people like Gary Francione, Tom Regan. I worked with people like Cass Sunstein and Martha Nussbaum on working for animals and trying to protect animals with the legal system. Immediately afterwards, I went to Northwestern, taught at law, and did kind of a combination of environmental law, animal law, and behavioral law and economics. And it's been a long road since that time. That was over 10 years ago now, but I'm still incredibly grateful to Gary for all the lessons that I've taught. And honestly,
when we met, was it, God, it must have been, I guess it was, because I met you when I came to give that paper that was published in the University of Chicago Law Forum. I think that was the first time I met you. When was that? Do you remember when that was?
I believe it was 2003, but it might have been 2004.
Oh, my. My, how time flies.
Yeah, and I have to say, Gary, I told you at the time, but you totally blew me away. And I had been somewhat familiar with your work at that point, but hearing you speak and then reading Rain Without Thunder really transformed the direction my activism took, because up until that point, I was 100% on the animal welfare bandwagon. And after that, I hope I've changed a little bit.
So, so you say Gary had a major influence on you. Do you remember specifically? Like, what can you recall? Anything further regarding?
It had honestly never even occurred to me that some of the animal protection legislation and animal welfare measures that corporations were taking might be counterproductive, because I just assumed that kind of what everyone assumed in the animal rights movement at the time, who was new to the movement, which was that anything that's good for animals or anything that seems to be good for animals is something we should be pushing. And in Rain Without Thunder, I think Gary very compellingly argues that some of these kind of voluntary commitments corporations are being made are nothing more than marketing platforms. They're an opportunity for corporations to make more money by reinforcing the notion that animals are commodities for us to use. And that basic philosophical and logical and factual point was honestly just something that never occurred to me until Gary presented it to me. So, I mean, I always say every time I talk to anyone about my beginnings as an animal rights activist, you know, I think before that I was an animal protection advocate, I was an animal welfare advocate, I was a dog and cat lover. But Gary, you're the one who made me an animal rights advocate in 2003 or 2004.
Well, then it would seem like with a little guidance, I know that Gary seems to feel that you've got off course a bit with your activism, and it sounds like, you know, by getting you two together here, maybe we can put things on the right path. And I have to say, Gary wakes up a lot of people. You know, I remember way back in my past there, I was collecting signatures for HSUS, and you know, I was battling the steel leg hole traps, and you know, thinking I was doing the right thing, and then I find that that was no resolution, that they simply switched to using snares or padded leg hole traps. You know, it was like, what a scam that was. You know, we thought we were going for some result, and then Gary, in coming on this radio show, which is now 17 years old this month, Gary, I think, woke up a lot of people, including myself, and you know, to the extent that he has asserted that vegan activism and advocacy is so foundational, so basic, and I feel that, you know, that's what I truly feel, and I feel that going off in other directions, or there are distractions along the way that are taking us to places. I mean, I actually admire the energy of direct action everywhere, and you know, I've been out there on the street, I've gone through many megaphones myself, but you know, my concerns are that there's no vegan message. I'm seeing, and again, as you were on the last time, as I expressed, I feel that there's a lot of vague sloganeering, you know, until every animal is free. You know, okay, I'm with you on that. What do I have to do, you know, to get every animal to go free? Well, I think we all have to go vegan, but I don't hear that, you know, like the call to action on what we're supposed to do. It's not food, it's violence. Okay, I'm with you. Should I get less violent food, or what should I do? Well, I should go vegan. Well, why didn't you tell me that, you know? And animal liberation now. What does that mean? You know, I marched with DXE in San Francisco. We were at Union Square, and for 20 minutes we were chanting, what do we want? Animal liberation. When do we want it? Now. And we had a big crowd, but our slogan was repetitive. Who doesn't want animal liberation? All the people there. Thumbs up. I'm with you for animal liberation. Well, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Well, you have to go vegan. That liberates the animals. So what am I missing here? Wayne and Gary, help me.
Well, I can't be of much help here, because to be honest, Wayne, I am actually puzzled by what the position, and I'm hoping that today I'll learn some, because I am very puzzled by the position that your organization takes, and I hear what you're saying, but yet, you know, I look at your website and you denigrate veganism. I mean, it's troubling to me that you completely ignore that there is a vegan movement out there that is a lot more than something that's resulting in powerless and isolated vegans, or people who are only focusing on the diet question, or people who are not focusing on broader questions. I find that very puzzling. I don't understand. I don't understand why you say it. And then I look at your website and I see things like you're promoting the anti-fur campaign in San Francisco, or you're urging people to write to Costco's CEO and tell them to cut ties, tell Costco to cut ties with animal abusing farms. Well, I don't understand. All farms are animal abusing farms. So I guess I'm confused. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but what I'm seeing is a group that really is with some superficial differences, but really no different ideologically from Mercy for Animals or PETA or any of the neo-welfarist organizations that promote a lot of really problematic stuff. And so I guess I'm really confused by what your position is. I mean, let me ask you a question, Wayne, and maybe this will help us. Let me ask you a question. Do you have any doubt that in order for us to shift the paradigm from animals as property to animals as non-human persons, and I don't use animal liberation, I use animal rights because, as you know, animal liberation is a concept that is very much associated with Peter Singer, I reject.
Sure.
But do you have any doubt that if we're going to shift the paradigm, we need to have a huge number of vegans, that nothing will happen until we have a large number of people who are committed to veganism as a matter of justice, not as a dietary thing or for health reasons or because because Beyonce does it or anything like that, but that people who are committed to veganism, not eating, wearing, using animals as a matter of social justice. Do you have any doubt in your mind that we need that movement before we will ever see any change?
I have no doubt, Gary, and I think the question, and I think the main small disagreement for me between you and I is how we get there. That, my view is that the way we get there is to unify movement, including the Mercy for Animals and PETAs of the world, who, while there are certainly things they do that I don't agree with, I think we have to be working with them rather than against them.
But Wayne,
get those people to be unified and speaking out, not just in being vegans quietly in their own homes, but being empowered and trained, inspired to go take action on the streets, talk to people, do vegan education. And just briefly, Gary, the last conversation I had with you did change some things about the work that I do. So I'll give you an example. At our most recent Fur Free Friday March, guess what sign we probably had more of than any other sign? A vegan sign. And part of that was because, frankly, you changed my mind a little bit in the last conversation, and maybe even more than a little bit, because prior to that, I'd been worried about the dynamics of focusing on consumer change in a city where consumer activism has a bad rap, for better or for worse. And in the Bay Area, when you talk about consumer activism, people don't like that. But I thought that you made some really valid points. And so we have programs like Carnivores Anonymous, where we're focusing on vegan education in non-vegan communities. We have vegan signs at even our fur marches. When we talked to Katie Tang and the San Francisco Board of Supervisors yesterday, guess what was the large portion of our conversation? It wasn't actually fur. It was actually about animals used for food and what action we could take with the city to stop the violence against animals in the food industry. So all these things are things that are product of conversations you've had with me, Gary. And every time I come through the New York area or the Northeast, I'd always encourage you to sit down with me and give me more feedback, because you've offered a lot of wisdom in the past. And I know there are things that I'm doing wrong, and I hope you give me the benefit of the doubt and help me correct them so I can do better things in the future.
I appreciate the spirit of your comments, but I really do, Wayne. I'm puzzled because, first of all, let's just go back over a couple of things you said just now. You were talking about having vegan signs at an anti-fur rally
at Fur Free Friday.
Yeah, Fur Free Friday.
We did that because of you, Gary. Honestly, I mean, that's the big part of it.
But do you think there's any difference between fur and wool and leather or anything like that? I mean, why are we singling out fur? Because isn't it the case, Wayne, that when we have an anti-fur rally or campaign, that requires a coalition of people, many of whom are wearing wool and leather and whatnot, but who think that fur is bad? I mean, I've been doing this, Wayne, for a long time. I've seen this. I think the anti-fur campaign is a perfect example of why single-issue campaigns are problematic in lots of ways and don't work, because they require coalitions of people who are engaged in other forms of exploitation, that in order to have those coalitions, they have to believe that what they're doing is morally better than what other people are morally doing, are doing rather, as a moral matter, and that is it's a recipe for disaster. I don't really, and on top of that, the anti-fur campaign has been one of the most incredibly sexist campaigns. It has been thoroughly polluted by misogyny and sexism from the very beginning, and that continues now. So I'm not sure when we talk about these things, I become very puzzled because you say, for example, Wayne, that we ought to work with the PETAs of this world. Now, as you know, or whether you know or don't know, in the early 1980s, I began my activism with PETA. I met the PETA folks when PETA was a very small organization, and worked with them on a pro bono basis well into the 1990s. And so I was once very good friends with both Ingrid Newkirk and Alex Pacheco, and with the other folks of PETA. And one of the things that, when I look at PETA and I look at their killing 95% of the animals they take in at the Norfolk facility. Now, I understand the thinking there. I know how that goes in terms of the belief that if you adopt animals out, there's a chance that they'll have a bad home. I guess that's true of children, human children as well. But it doesn't justify killing. When you're talking, you're talking about killing a fairly large number of animals every single year. I look at PETA's campaigns, which are relentlessly misogynistic. I look at the fact that they gave an award to Temple Grandin, a slaughterhouse designer. I look at the fact that they gave an award to Patrick Buchanan, a man who has deeply troubling attitudes about immigration and things like that. I look at their reactionary position. Let's just focus on their sex. How can one work with an organization that relentlessly promotes misogyny and sexism? How are we ever going to have justice for animals if we are engaging, promoting, and supporting misogyny and sexism? I don't understand that. Final point with what you just said. I look at groups like Mercy for Animals and PETA. I have nothing to do with what they do. I have absolutely no desire to work with them because they do something very different. They both promote a vision of that one can exploit in better ways, and that there are right ways to do the wrong thing. And I reject that. And I also reject the idea that what I am doing and what other people who promote abolition are doing is consumerist. It's not. It's not about consumerism, and it's not about consumer activism. It's about social justice. It's about fundamental fairness, Wayne. It's about educating people about how, if they believe animals matter morally, then veganism is the only rational response. That's not a matter of consumer activism. That's a matter of fundamental moral education. And so I think we just, look, fair enough, Wayne, we see things in a different way, and I understand that. You run a group, I don't. You have to do fundraising, I don't. I have a job, I go and I teach law and I get paid and I do this stuff in my spare time. And you run a group. You have to fundraise. You have to bring money in to support yourself and the other people that work there. I understand that. But, I also think that you've been not quite fair in terms of how you've portrayed veganism. Ironically, the consumerist and really problematic aspects of veganism that you identify are promoted by the exact groups that you support, Wayne. The groups that you partner with. The idea that you have a problem with veganism and yet you support groups like Mercy for Animals or groups like PETA. It confuses me. And I'm not trying to be argumentative. Honestly, Wayne, I'm puzzled. I'm truly puzzled.
Yeah, those are great points, Gary. And if I can distill them, I think the two main points are, one, how do we distinguish between fur and all these other forms of animal exploitation? And second, how do we work with groups when we think that some of the things they're doing might be mistakes, might even be ethical mistakes? So I'll just take each of those points in turn. With respect to the first point, I agree with you 100% that there is no difference between fur and leather. The only difference from a pragmatic perspective is we can ban fur in San Francisco and save probably 20,000 animals from torment and fur farms, and we can't ban leather yet. So
Wayne, people are not. If you ban fur, Wayne, they're not.
Is it okay if I just finish my point real quick?
Well, it's sort of, I mean, sure, fine, go ahead.
Sure. No, but I just want to make the point that in the actual legislation that we passed or we presented before the board, and it will pass in the next 3 weeks in San Francisco, it expressly says that San Francisco is a city that believes in kindness towards animals, not just human animals, but non-human animals as well. And so this law will be a foundation for further legislation. And if you look at the history of social justice, voting rights didn't happen for everyone in the country at once. It happened for people of color first with the 15th Amendment, and then it took close to 60 years before we passed it for women too. And so I think sometimes, I agree with you 100%, Gary, that we have to have our vision in our crosshairs, that we have to understand that we're not going to stop here, that after we ban fur, we have to go after leather, we have to go to the meat industry, we have to go after experimentation, circuses, and everything, because all animal exploitation is the same. You're right. But I think strategically targeting certain campaigns that we can win now is important for the movement to build. So on the second point, should we work with groups that have policies or practices that we don't agree with and that might even have ethical flaws? I think we absolutely have to. And I think this is a problem with the modern left. And honestly, I think you've done some great work in this area where the purity policies of the left have destroyed some of the greatest activists on the left. And I know you've been attacked mercilessly by people who identify as progressive. And this is something the right does much better than us. They unify. And one of the things that I've learned as an anti-racist activist, as an environmental activist, and as an animal rights activist is that we're stronger if we're together. So while I don't agree with everything that PETA does, I don't agree with everything that Mercy for Animal does, I'm sure I don't agree with everything that you do, honestly, either. And I'm sure all PETA, MFA, and you don't agree with everything that DXC does. We are all stronger if we're together. And so my mission as an animal rights activist is to build big coalitions, even across movements, so that all these groups, instead of looking at our flaws, focus on the flaws for sure. Have constructive dialogue, have compassion for each other, and try and educate each other, as you've done so excellently over the past, I think, 30-plus years. But at the end of the day, we have to work together against the big systems of oppression, against the Smithfields of the world, if we're going to win.
Well, but Wayne, now, interestingly, you talked about how we make incremental change in social justice. But as, I wrote a long time ago and have stated a number of times since, you can't compare. When you decide that a group of humans matter and they're part of the moral community, and then the question becomes, how do you accord treatment to them that results in equal consideration? And, you can't compare that situation. We didn't get rid of slavery incrementally. I mean, we're talking about the difference between shifting the paradigm from property to persons with respect to animals. You don't do that. You don't do that by making animal exploitation more humane, or by opposing fur or things like that. You don't do that. I mean, once you liberate the slaves, then you have the discussion about, what does equal consideration require in terms of how we treat everybody? But you can't have that discussion while people are still property. You couldn't have that discussion in 1843. You could only have that discussion after slavery ended. So you can't have, to try to compare these things and say, well, we've made changes, we made incremental progress in civil rights. Right, but the problem, or the characteristic there, was you had humans who were no longer considered as property, and the discussion was, what does equal consideration require? We weren't talking about incrementally eradicating slavery, which is what you're talking about when and if there's anything that is fundamental in my work, it's the idea that you can't incrementally eradicate the property status of animals. You need a paradigm shift, and the only way that paradigm shift happens is if a large number of people come to the position that eating, wearing, using, and exploiting animals in any way is morally unacceptable. That's the only way the system's going to change. The problem is not the slaughterhouses. It's not the institutional exploiters. It's the fact that that most people don't see this as wrong. And so as long as most people don't see it as wrong, the suppliers, I mean, capitalists are indifferent as to whether or not they sell beef or bananas. If there's demand for beef, they'll sell beef. If there's more demand for bananas, they'll sell bananas. So the problem really isn't the suppliers or the institutional exploiters. They're simply responding to the fact that we live in a culture in which most people demand and the products of animal exploitation. And so that's never going to change unless we have a significant vegan movement. And one of the things that troubles me is when you say, well, you know, we're stronger together, but you're assuming that we're unified in what it is we want. And when I hear Nathan Runkle, who I guess is no longer the head of Mercy for Animals, but was when he made the statement that, you know, oh yeah, veganism is the gold standard, but, you know, people don't have to be vegan as long as they're, you know, they're buying cage-free eggs or they're promoting more humane forms of exploitation. That's a position that I find, you know, that's not a question, that's not an issue, Wayne, of whether it's possibly or perhaps morally problematic. That is morally problematic. That's morally obscene. And so is the sexism of PETA. I mean, I'm so surprised and very disappointed that I think PETA's sexism, which is one of the reasons why, not the only reason why, but it's one of the reasons why I stopped working with them. I thought the sexism was just appalling, and it got even worse. I mean, you know, it went from sexism to the sort of rank, dramatically misogynistic characterizations and exploitation of women. I think it's just dreadful. And, you know, if you think we're really going to stop treating animals like meat, as long, you know, while we're still treating women like meat, I must say I disagree very much with that, as I do with the idea that they're killing animals. I mean, what sort of animal rights group is killing 95% of the animals they're taking in at their shelter, Wayne? I mean, you know, you talk about the importance of the individual animal. I'm all with you on that. But how the hell do you justify the fact that, you know, and that's not just a question of like, well, maybe it's a little morally problematic. It is morally problematic when you're killing 95% of the animals you're taking in. So, I mean, I don't know. I find these things very troubling and confusing. I don't understand where you're coming from. And I'm trying to understand, but, you know, I don't, I must say.
Let me jump in here to let people know this is Go Vegan Radio with Bob Linden, and our discussion today is with Wayne Hsiung of Direct Action Everywhere and Professor Gary Francione. And I am looking, you know, in terms of vegan activism, Wayne. I was out there for Fur Free Friday all the time. Years ago, that's what I thought.
Remember. I think you came to one we organized.
I was out there with my megaphone. I've been arrested a number of times on free speech issues related to fur, and you know, I've come to where if I'm going to be a vegan activist, I have to expand it to mean don't wear animals at all. So, you know, don't eat them, don't wear them, don't use them. So why wouldn't we expand the fur issue to the not wearing animals and not using them, so that it's not just that we don't want fur, but we don't want wool, leather, feathers, silk to be worn also. And in terms of legislation and bans, from what I see, what usually happens is they don't get enforced, or they get overturned. You know, if you look at foie gras, the foie gras ban, nobody wanted to enforce it, and restaurants would just serve it for free and charge $20 for a cracker. You know, so we're wasting all of our time where that energy and time could be going toward veganism, toward promoting people, asking people to go vegan, which is what the animals and the planet really need most right now.
Bob, let me ask you a question. I mean, well, let me ask you both the question. Does anybody maintain? I mean, let's assume San Francisco has a fur ban. Let's assume. I don't even know. Let's assume they ban for whatever that means. But let's take the most expansive interpretation of ban. Is there some idea that people are going to start wearing cotton or synthetic fabrics Or is it simply the case that people are going to, do what they do when they stop eating veal, they eat more, they eat more non-veal meat. They don't, in other words, this idea that we sort of target these things and then people go to vegan alternatives is a fantasy. It's simply empirically wrong. So if you have an anti-fur campaign, the anti-fur campaigns have been going on now for longer than I've been in the movement, which is a long time. And the reality is the fur industry is stronger now than it was 50 years ago. And so, this, I don't know where y'all think this is going, but even if San Francisco bans fur, you think the people in San Francisco are not going to continue to wear wool or leather? Of course they are.
Or buy fur in Berkeley or wherever.
Exactly. So this idea that it's going to save 20,000 animals, I don't know. How's it going to save any animals? I mean, if people aren't going to say, oh well, I'm getting rid of fur, and you know what? It's absolutely wrong to wear animal clothing, so I'm not going to wear wool or leather or silk or anything like that. And I'm not, it's like meat-free Monday. You have meat-free Monday, and what do people do? They ramp up on egg consumption. Yeah, and so, and as a matter of fact, Bob, didn't you have somebody on your show that said that they were happy that they loved meatless Monday?
It was on another radio show, the Diane Rehm show, where Paul Souter, the chairperson of the American Egg Board, was thanking meat-free Mondays for the highest egg sales in 30 years.
I think these things really send the wrong message. They send the idea that fur is somehow qualitatively worse than wool. It's not. They send the idea that veal is worse than other things, or that meat is worse than dairy, or whatever. It's stuff that's reinforced in DXE. DXE has the vegan pledge, and it talks about the levels, and it talks about, well, you might decide you want to sit at a table where eggs and dairy are being consumed. Well, you're then sending the message. My view is I'll eat with anybody, even if they're eating animal products, but I will talk about the need for veganism. The idea that I'm not going to sit with somebody eating meat, but it's okay for me to sit with somebody who's eating eggs or dairy. My view is you educate everybody you can, and people aren't going to understand unless you explain it to them, and you can't explain it to them if you don't interact with them. And so we need to interact with them. But I'm really worried about the message that's being sent out. When Wayne Shun says, what I want you to do is contact Costco and tell them to cut ties with animal abusing farms. Wayne, how does that not send the message to people that you all believe that there are some farms that are not animal abusing? I mean, what sense does it make to write to Costco and say, cut your ties with animal abusing farms? What the hell does that even mean?
There are farms that don't abuse animals, Gary, and there are orange farms and apple farms and beet farms. And
wait. Are you saying that the petition that you have, it could be understood by anybody as saying that Costco ought to cut its ties with every animal farm and ought to sell beets and oranges and apples? You think that's what that petition means? Because
that's exactly what I've said to the CEO of Costco, Gary. I've sent it to him in an email. And they can interpret it however they like, because the petition can be construed however they like to construe it. But from our perspective, if you believe that Costco should not be selling from places that abuse animals, then you're right, I'm right, and anyone else who understands that correctly is right, that means they should be adopting a vegan policy. Are they going to do it overnight? No. But I think it'd be a great thing for them to say, even just as an optics matter, that we will not support any animal abusing business. And I think you'd agree with me on that. But Gary, can I jump in? There have been a lot of points made, and I want to make sure I address them all.
Sure.
So on the property status of animals, you and I are in 100% agreement on this, that your work is foundational on this, that if animals are property, it is extremely difficult or maybe even impossible to address any welfare concerns, right? Because they're considered just things, that the law cannot offer any protection. And, your work on this issue has transformed many people's thoughts. And I know I've talked to Steve Wise. He has exactly the same perspective as you, probably based in part on your work, that the reason he works on non-human rights and not non-human welfare is because as long as animals are legally considered things, we cannot protect their welfare. So you and I are 100% in agreement on that. I think, again, the disagreement is how do we get to the point where we undermine the property status of animals? I believe that some of these incremental victories are leading to momentum and political mobilization that will ultimately conclude with the undermining of the property status of animals. And I look at the history of the gay rights movement or the anti-slavery movement or the women's rights movement, and I see many victories like this. in gay rights, they didn't achieve abolition of all homophobia and discrimination against LGBTQ across the country, or even in one city all at once. They had specific victories on specific single-issue campaigns. And if you know the history of the gay rights movement, it was a campaign in Hawaii that allowed gay marriage. And gay marriage was not LGBT equality. It wasn't the abolition of discrimination against gay folks. It was just gay marriage. But that roused millions of people around the world. And if you talk to people like Evan Wilson, who I've talked to, that was a crucial victory in mobilizing people over the next 30 years and getting to the point that LGBT equality is becoming a constitutional right. So that's the first point. How do we actually undermine the status of animals? The second thing is you've raised some compelling points about various organizations, including ours, that are making ethical mistakes. In my perspective,
I'm going to need to jump in on this when you're done.
Can I finish this point?
Absolutely.
Let me finish this point, Bob, and then I'll move on.
Okay.
But I think you're making compelling critiques of us, of Mercy for Animals, and PETA. And my only suggestion to you, Gary, is to give folks the benefit of the doubt. Just like you gave me the benefit of the doubt in 2003 when we first met. I was completely an animal welfarist. If you had said, I'm not going to work with you, Wayne, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm not going to even talk to you, then I wouldn't learn from you. And maybe it's just me as a Chinese person believing this, but my view is that we don't air out our dirty laundry as a movement publicly, that what we should do is privately talk to each other, have dialogue, have arguments, even yell at each other a little bit if it comes down to that. But when we argue with each other and fight with each other publicly, that serves the interest of animal agriculture. It demoralizes our activists. All the vegan education that you want PETA and Mercy for Animals to do doesn't get done because they're demoralized by your critiques. And Gary, you have such a powerful voice. I know this because I've been influenced by your voice for the past 20 years. And when you say positive things about people, it inspires them. And when you criticize them, it really hurts them. I just don't want these activists to be hurt and demoralized. I want them to be inspired to do the great work that you want them to do too.
Wayne, do you think that I did not try in the 1990s to change? What do you think Rain Without Thunder was, Wayne? Do you think it was like I did it for my health? I wrote that book because I wrote that book because I was trying to change the movement. I was trying to send a signal to the movement that we were going in the wrong direction, that the animal rights movement was collapsing into the animal welfare movement. And the result was basically that book came out and everybody stopped talking to me, which was fine. I mean, it's okay. It made it clear to me that there was no movement, number one. Number two, I think one of the things about my critique that you have not understood is or appreciated is that when you have these groups, these charities that are competing for donations, you, in order to have your donor base as broad as possible, you've got to take positions which appeal to people who are still continuing to engage in animal exploitation, and that's the problem. The problem is these organizations, unfortunately, including DXE, promotes positions that I think try to make people feel comfortable, and for example, I mean the denigration that DXE does on veganism. I mean, I suppose it may help you to sort of appeal to people who are not vegans, but again, if we're going to ever change this situation, we're going to have a very large number of people who are vegan. And the only way you get people to be vegan is you talk about veganism. And when I go to the
clarifying question, where do you think we denigrate veganism?
My God, Wayne, I've got it up on my screen because I was looking at it today.
Okay.
Your thing where hold on a second, I can get the page. My computer is very slow. It's the page where you talk about you have a veganism. What's the DXE position on veganism? Sure. And I it's basically you're basically saying, well, veganism doesn't go far enough. We've got to be anti-species. Well, first of all, you never have I think fairly characterized the abolitionist movement, which is far. I mean, which. To say that what is going on with the abolitionist movement is consumerism, I think is really unfair. I think it's inaccurate, and I think it's a misrepresentation of what the work is and what my position is. I think it's a misrepresentation. That's fine. I don't care. I mean, a lot of people misrepresent my work, so join the crowd.
Oh, I agree with you there, Gary. That the veganism that I'm attacking is not your veganism. It's the veganism understood by the mainstream. So if every vegan in the world were Gary Francione, then veganism and activism would be the same. So we're in agreement there, Gary.
Okay, but the thing is then, why do you say then that veganism shouldn't be the moral baseline? Because that's I'm looking at it. So what is veganism page? and you're portraying veganism in a very negative way, as consumerist, as focused on diet, as not, I promote it as a matter of social justice. I promote it as a matter of fundamental fairness. I promote it as a matter of animal rights. And also, I make the connection with violence. I make the connection with non-discrimination. Again, basically, not using discrimination against humans in order to achieve rights for non-humans, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the way you've characterized it, you say, well, veganism isn't the moral baseline, which is exactly that's my position. So you're saying, well, veganism can't be the moral baseline. Because activism has to. I still don't. That's something, Wayne. You and I talked about that several years ago. I didn't understand it then. I still don't understand it. But what I do understand is that veganism must be. We need if we're ever going to change this. If we're ever going to change it, we need to have a large number of people who are committed to abolitionist veganism. Without that, if you think that you are going to change anything, if you think that there will be that it's all going to fall because you have a victory in San Francisco or because Wayne, this stuff's been going on forever. These single issue campaigns have been going on forever. We had the anti-fur campaign in the 1960s. We had the anti-veal campaign. We had the anti-foie gras campaign. We had the anti-this campaign, the anti-that campaign. And you know what? We're exploiting more animals now in more horrific ways than at any point in human history. It doesn't work that way. When you're talking about property status, you can't analogize that to how gay rights came into effect, because we weren't talking about gay people being slaves. We were talking about whether or not, how people's moral views about homosexuality and sexuality generally changed. But we weren't talking about going from slavery to gay rights. We were talking about people's views about homosexuality where persons already acknowledged to be full members of the moral community were involved. So you can't really make the analogy and say, well, if we have a couple victories, that the victories are going to be like, if we start think about what happened in Hawaii with gay rights, and then it was bottom line, Wayne, is I've been hearing this from animal people since I was your age and younger. I don't know how old you are, but you're much younger than I am, I'm sure.
I'm a little bit younger than you, Gary.
Yeah, and I am sure. I've been hearing this from animal people for as long as I remember, that what we need to do is chip away and chip away and chip away. And the answer is, you know what? That don't work. And the empirical proof is there. So it's like if you get San Francisco to declare, you know what, Wayne? It's not going to make a damn bit of difference. Not a damn bit of difference. The only thing that matters is getting people to say, I'm not going to eat them. I'm not going to wear them. I'm not going to use them. Because you know what? Vegans don't go to circuses. Vegans don't go to, abolitionist vegans don't do those things. We don't participate in those things. As long as you're focusing on those things as single issue campaigns, the only way, Wayne, the only way a single issue campaign can work is by putting together a coalition of people who believe that certain forms of animal exploitation are morally more odious than others, and who believe that participating in the less morally problematic ones is morally acceptable. That's how single issue campaigns work. I've been writing about this for years now. That's how they work. I've really not encountered one that is any different. And so, and finally, I want to say something about this airing of dirty laundry. You are assuming that I've got nothing in common with people who promote sexism and misogyny. Nothing in common. It's not a question of whether or not they're family members and I want to air the dirty laundry. I've got nothing in common with people who promote sexism and misogyny. I've got nothing in common with people who give awards to slaughterhouse designers. I've got nothing in common with people who have campaigns in which they promote animal exploiters or they promote cage-free eggs or crate-free pork and things. I've got nothing in common with those people. Yeah, absolutely nothing. And so to say that, well, I should not. I tried in the 1990s to say people were going in the wrong direction, and everybody got upset with me. Everybody got really angry with me. I have a piece coming out, Wayne, which I think you may find of interest, maybe not. But
I always find everything you write of interest.
There's special issue of Between the Species coming out that's dedicated to Tom Reagan. And I wrote what was for me a very difficult piece, which was about how, the animal rights movement emerged in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and how it basically fell apart. And I talk a little bit about what happened in the mid 1990s that resulted in my writing Rain Without Thunder, and what happened when the movement reacted very strongly against what Reagan and I were doing, because what we were doing in the first part of the 1990s was we were trying to educate the movement about why animal welfareism and why single issue campaigns were problematic. And we got a very strong reaction in 1995, 96, as that sort of era, that time, and it resulted in Tom and I parting company, because Tom decided that he was going to work with the groups, and he was going to cooperate with the groups. I wouldn't do that. And so I think this idea that, I should sit down and talk with them. I've been sitting down and talking with them for a long time. I mean, I remember in 1991, Wayne, going to the Summit for Animals. You probably don't know. I don't think that exists anymore, but there used to be something every year where the groups used to get together. The heads of the groups used to get together, and they used to discuss matters of common interest or whatever. And I was never at that because I didn't run a group. And I was invited. It may have been 89. It was a long time ago. And I was invited because I was speaking out against sexism in the movement. And Cleveland Amory, who was then, he's now dead, but Cleveland Amory, who ran a group called Fund for Animals, he was then the head of the summit, and he invited me to come and speak. And I came and I spoke about sexism in the movement at a time when feminists for animal rights weren't saying anything, because they didn't want to say anything, because they had reasons why they didn't want to say anything. But feminists for animal rights did not come out against the sexism and misogyny until 1994, 95, around then. So I was sort of out there by myself, talking about the problems with sexism in the movement, and I gave a talk to a group of leaders of the movement who looked at me as if I had two heads. And I remember Cleveland Amory saying to me, Gary, you're a nice guy, I really like you, but I don't believe we have any position on sexism any more than we have a position on any other sort of issue that isn't related to animals. And that's the way it's always been, Wayne. But I mean, I've been trying to talk about these issues for a long time. And I've been trying to discuss these issues with people in the movement. Do you think I've never had discussions with these folks before? I went to the so-called Animal Rights Conference in 2013, and I said, look, people, this isn't working. This happy exploitation thing is a really bad idea. And I gave my arguments, and the result was people got so upset with me that the people who funded Alex Hershaft's little party there told him if I was ever there again, they were going to withdraw their funding. And Alex wrote me an email saying that we weren't going to discuss welfare and rights anymore at the conference because it was upsetting to people. So, I mean, I tried, Wayne. I've really tried. And, I've really tried. But I really think that I think we've got to come to a fund. I mean, look, my view is clear. We want to change the world. You change the world by getting people to commit to a vision of nonviolence where they don't eat animals, wear animals, use animals, and where they do not participate in human discrimination either. Because I'm tired of this business about the Koreans eating dogs, or the Spanish people doing bullfights, or all of this xenophobic, ethnocentric nonsense. Because it is corrosive. It is absolutely corrosive. I understand it's good for fundraising.
Thank you for that too, Gary. Because it's helped my community, honestly.
Well, I mean,
I've seen much less racism in the movement, partly because of the work you've done over the past 20 years, and. My community is the one that was most targeted by a lot of this stuff.
I mean, I have to tell you, I was horrified when I saw that video of the DXC people in Venice. When was Chase, I forget what the guy's name, I think is in the first name. Yeah. I was horrified when I saw that. And I was very disappointed when I saw the co-founder of DXC, whose name I will not pronounce correctly and embarrass myself. But how is your co-founder's name pronounced?
Priya Sahani?
Okay, all right. Priya Sahani?
The honey. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I saw her basically saying that she had made the decision that she wasn't going to criticize what he did. And Wayne, I have to tell you, I mean, what are we talking about here? You know, I mean, that event was in my judgment, troubling on multiple levels.
Sure.
Troubling on multiple levels. And instead
you
of
have to explain it a little, Gary, for people listening.
Well, it was some DXE people were having some. They were.
To be clear, it was not a DXE protest, Gary.
The guy is your organizer. Okay, fine. Then
Yeah, he isn't a DXE organizer either. He's a supporter of ours, but he's not a DXE organizer either. He is a DXE supporter for sure.
Okay. A DXE supporter was trying to show some videos. I don't know what the videos were, but he was trying to show some videos to some people sitting in from what I understand, a wine bar or something. But I'm sure that they served animal products. And there was a bouncer there, and a black guy, and he was trying to keep them away from the window. And these DXE supporters were trying to hold the thing over the guy's head and show it to the people in the restaurant, and it resulted in some violence, some physical violence, and some really, I thought, obnoxious, horrible behavior. And the DXE co-founder said that she would not criticize it, and I was horrified.
To be clear, Gary, I mean, one of the activists had their face fractured and their jaw broken. And I think Priya's main, and the violence, there was violence. One of the activists, not a DXE activist, not a DXE organizer, one of the activists, not Chase, did spit on somebody, and that was wrong. He did apologize for it. But the reason Priya didn't want to comment on that was because there was someone in the emergency room getting surgery, having their jaw repaired.
No,
it was appropriate. It's kind of like when someone just died, you don't speak ill.
Wait. She wasn't not. She said. She was actually supportive. She said, I will not criticize what went on there. She could have said, look, I oppose all violence. I mean, it's not clear, but it appears to, I watched the video, and it appeared to me that and from what I read, that the DXE supporter was the guy who had the pepper spray with him. But I don't know. But in any event, so there was issues about pepper spray and who used the pepper spray. And apparently, at least what I saw was that the DXE supporter was the guy who had the pepper spray with him. What the hell people are carrying pepper spray for, I don't really know. But why?
Just as a factual matter, though, the person who ended up in the emergency room was an animal rights activist. And I think it's just kind of like if you've ever been at a funeral or had someone, even someone you didn't like, pass away, you don't speak ill of them because it's just a hard time for the family.
It's not a question of speaking ill. It's a question of saying, look, we shouldn't do that sort of stuff. We shouldn't have those sorts of events. Those sorts of events are problematic.
Yeah, I think the common strand, if I could try and tie this together, I think the common strand is, your perspective is when someone makes an ethical mistake, you have nothing in common with that, or at least if it's a serious enough ethical mistake. And you mentioned Nathan Runkle, support for cage-free eggs, Ingrid Nurker and PETA, and sexism. And this is just a fundamental disagreement between you and I. And it might be because our backgrounds are different. I come from a Buddhist background where I believe I have something in common with everyone. All life on this earth is precious. All life is connected. And I think you've done great work on this area, honestly, in showing the intersectionality between all these causes, the common struggles that people of color and women and LGBTQ folks and animals face. But my perspective is, at the end of the day, for us to actually achieve change on any of these issues, we all have to come together. And that even a slaughterhouse worker, and I don't know if you know this, but we did a big sit-in, a nonviolent sit-in. I think you might like the action. We're completely peaceful. We barely even offered a word. We walked in with a few hundred people with flowers in our hands. We just sat down in the slaughterhouse and asked them to release all the animals. And we were there with compassion in our hearts, even towards the slaughterhouse workers and the owner. And the result of that is the slaughterhouse has now successfully allowed us to continuously bear witness, to go back in the slaughterhouse and release more animals and do more great vegan education with all that work we're doing and bring more people to the front lines. And that was only possible because we had compassion and nonviolence in our hearts, even towards someone who was hurting animals.
Wayne,
in many ways, I think it's even more important to have compassion for folks who are doing things that are wrong, because I'm not saying we shouldn't confront them, and I think you've done a great job of confronting and challenging some of the injustices in the world and some of the injustices within the animal rights movement. But while we challenge those systems of oppression and those ideologies, we have to have compassion and love for the individuals in order to create change. And that's what we've done, not just animal abusers, but people within the movement we disagree with.
Wait a minute. I don't need you to tell me that I need to be compassionate towards people. I think that that's really patronizing, and I'm offended by that. It is not a question of whether I'm being compassionate. First of all, with respect to slaughterhouse workers aren't the problem, Wayne. Most of those people, I mean, who the hell works in a slaughterhouse? It's like not the job of choice for most people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a horrible job. It has the highest turnover rate and the highest rate of injury. It's not a job that a lot of people sort of are lining up to get. Slaughterhouse workers aren't the problem. Slaughterhouse owners, frankly, aren't the problem. The problem is the people who demand, the people who say, I want dead animals. I want meat. I want eggs. I want cheese. I want ice cream. I want butter, whatever. Those people are the people who are driving the institutionalized exploitation. So I don't feel any animosity towards people in slaughterhouses. Indeed, I see them in certain ways as in many ways victimized themselves in various respects. But it's not a question of not having compassion in my heart for people in the animal movement who are promoting happy exploitation. I just disagree with them. Now they turn around. I mean, I've been saying these things for a long time, and you know what? They don't engage the critique, Wayne. They just call me names and say really nasty things. Maybe you ought to talk to them.
That's wrong.
Maybe you ought to talk to them about compassion. Maybe you ought to talk to some of them, because I've tried to have discussions. Now, part of the thing is, in the 1990s, I believe that it was possible to change things. I didn't really appreciate the extent to which the animal movement is a business. And it is a business, Wayne, and I think we've got to be clear about that. It's a business. And Alex Pacheco once said, we're a business, we sell compassion. And I wrote about that in 1996 in Rain Without Thunder, because I was somewhat disturbed by my friend Alex's statement in that regard. But he was right, and I didn't really appreciate in many ways what Alex was saying, that it's a movement that is selling something. And what it's selling is, not animal rights and not veganism, because none of these groups, including your own, maintain that veganism is a moral imperative, that it is something we have a moral obligation to do if we believe that animals matter morally. We don't have a choice. So it's not a question of, it's not an option. It's a moral obligation in the same way that we have other moral obligations that are fundamental and that can't be compromised. And so, none of these groups promote that idea. All of them promote the idea, well, we've got to have different approaches, and, we can't take, blah, 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 blah. And, you've got, this idea, Wayne, that, I'm all in favor of saying that we have to be compassionate to everybody. But that doesn't mean that I say that people who are exploiting animals are doing something right, or that there's something wrong with my saying that all animal exploitation is morally wrong, and that if you're engaging in it, you're engaging in morally wrong action. People say to me, well, but that's not compassionate. The answer is, sorry, I'm making a moral point. And if you're telling me that what compassion means is that I have to say to people that it's all right for them, that it's not morally objectionable for them to exploit animals, I can't do that. I just can't do that. And neither should you.
Gary, I totally hear you when you say your intent is not to scare or to hurt people. But if I told you that I've had dozens of people tell me that, honestly, even before this conversation, that you should be scared that Gary is going to destroy you or hurt you, and I've never felt that way about you. I think you've been scared of what? Scared of what? I just think we cannot create a climate where, because people are not going to hear your critiques if they're scared.
Wayne.
I want people to hear you, Gary. I want people to respect the positions you have, because I think a lot of them, in fact, I'd say the vast majority, maybe 99% of them, I agree with 100%, and I think they're the right positions for the movement. But if we don't create a culture where people have enough comfort and safety in talking to each other, they feel they can have a dialogue and not feel attacked or hurt by it. And I think we have to change things in the way we communicate.
What are we talking about? Afraid or hurt? What are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that I have arguments they can't respond to. Is that the problem? Because I don't. What are we talking about? Attack? I'm a little confused here, and I'm a little concerned. What do you mean by attacked or hurt? Do you mean I have arguments that they can't deal with? That I have arguments that they don't want to deal with? What do you mean by attacked or hurt? Do you mean I have arguments that they can't respond to? Is that the problem? Because I don't. You know, what are we talking about? Attack? I'm a little confused here, and I'm a little concerned. What do you mean by attacked or hurt? Do you mean I have arguments that they don't want to deal with? That I have arguments that they don't want Is that what we're talking about? Because that's the only thing I see. I see a bunch of people out there who are doing things that are completely problematic. I make the arguments, and then they turn around and they call me names. So, I mean, what do you want from me, Wayne?
No, that's not appropriate either. I mean, if anyone, even on my Facebook page, if somebody says something negative and critical and hateful towards you, I mean, I want to delete that. That's not okay. I think the basic issue is a lot of times what you're saying might not be a personal attack, but whenever a powerful and eloquent person publicly criticizes you, it's perceived as extremely hurtful. And my suggestion, and I totally apologize if this is patronizing, because you have 30 years more experience than I do, and there's so many things that you know way better than I do. But my suggestion is, if we have critiques of each other within the movement, it'll create a better culture of communication if we raise them with each other privately instead of attacking each other on Facebook.
Because can I jump in for a second here, just to let people know that this is Go Vegan Radio with Bob Linden at goveganradio.com, on Twitter at Go Vegan Radio, Facebook Go Vegan Radio with Bob Linden. And then when you want to calm down after hearing all of this, go turn on radiobobby.com, our 24/7 music station.
So you think it's good people are scared of you? I mean, I don't think it's good, because I think they should be reading your books. I think they should be following your Facebook page, as I follow your Facebook page and as I read your books. I mean, I still recommend Eat Like You Care to folks, but the fact that people are scared to talk to you affects their ability to listen to what you're saying, and I just don't want to.
What do you mean scared to talk to me? What do you mean? What does that mean, Wayne? Does that mean anything more than I have arguments they can't respond to? What does it mean, Wayne?
It means they think they're going to be put, out into the public and just put in the stocks and shamed the way people used to in 300, 400 years ago in the United States, when they committed some, sometimes spurious but sometimes real crime. And we've moved away from public shaming as a way to address moral flaws in human beings. And I'm a great believer in restorative justice, even for the most egregious and violent crimes, that even when people are killers, we should have compassion for them and try and restore them rather than shame them. And I think a lot of what you do, whether it's meant to be, I don't think you intend to do this, but the effect is people feel ashamed of themselves. And people who are ashamed are not powerful activists, and are not willing to listen, are not able to educate themselves. It's like a student. You're a teacher. And if you shamed one of your students on a regular basis, they probably just stopped coming to class.
Wait. But this word, you're using these words as if they have to shame. Now let's talk about shaming for a second. So if somebody has an event where there is some really egregious sexism, or some sort of violence, or some sort of racist behavior, and I call it out and I say I think that that's wrong, or if I object to PETA's campaigns, or I think that Mercy for Animals' promotion of happy exploitation is really problematic, and I say that. And by the way, I happen to think that the sorts of things that many of these groups do is every bit as bad as what the meat industry itself does, because in many ways, the whole happy exploitation movement is an adjunct to what they're doing, is an adjunct to the institutionalized exploitation of animals. So when I call that out and I say I think that's a really bad idea, then that's shaming. I'm sorry. I object to that word. I'm not shaming anybody. I'm making an argument that this makes no sense for these reasons. If you think I'm wrong, then you tell me why my argument's not valid. But to say that you can't respond to my argument, but you are shamed, and that I shouldn't shame people, is basically what you're saying is I should not stand up for fundamental rights and for the justice of not exploiting non-human animals in a very clear way. You're saying I shouldn't do that because it results in shaming people. I'm sorry, Wayne. I can't accept that. Number one. Number two. People know if anybody was interested in having a discussion with me, they know. I know these. I know. Some of the younger people I don't know, but some of the folks that have been around a while, who are still around, I've known these people for decades, Wayne. So they know where to find me, and they know what my arguments are. And I didn't start making them last week. I've been making them now for 25 years, 28 years, whatever. And come on. At this point in time, it's not a question of, if they have nothing to say, if after all of this time these people don't have any responses to my argument, come on. What are we talking about here? They don't like what I say, so they feel shamed. I don't even know what the hell that means. I mean, I have no idea even what that means, Wayne. I have no idea what that means. So what I'm suggesting is, if anybody really gives a darn about animal rights, if anybody really wants to, to understand, I mean, I am more than happy, Wayne. My offer is out there. I'll be happy to go to any of these groups and have discussions with them about why single issue campaigns are counterproductive, why welfarist campaigns are counterproductive, why sexism, racism, xenophobia, ethnocentrism is really problematic. I'm more than happy to do that. I mean, I've written about it, but if they would like to hear it from me orally, or they'd like to talk with me about it, that's fine. They know where to find me. They're not breaking down my doors, Wayne. They're not really breaking down my doors.
Well, we will. We'll take you up on that offer, Gary.
Yeah, okay.
I would genuinely love to hear your perspective on the fur campaign, for example, and what we can do to make it more abolitionist and effective, just for the record.
Okay. Can I, I'd like to jump in here, and I may have an opinion, which I'd like to express. So, Wayne, I'm certainly not shaming. And
don't worry about me. I'm in a position, so feel free to attack me. I'm talking more about.
No one's attacking anybody. It's a question of criticism. No one's attacking. Let's be careful about the language we use. It's not attacking. It's criticizing.
Right. And Wayne, I believe that you come from a position of really caring for animals, and that you're very concerned and compassionate. And I feel like. I feel like you and the public and so many others have been duped by these organizations who are nothing more than the meat, dairy, fish, and egg industries in disguise. They're wearing the masks of animal advocates. And I say this because of their policies, but I mean, just out front, the Humane Society of the United States is a member of an international federation, an international so-called livestock federation, whose mission is to meet the demand, a 70% demand in so-called livestock products by 2050. It's been run by a pig farmer. It has distributed bacon coupons. I don't know how we can think of these groups as animal charities or animal advocates, other than they have appointed themselves and we're believing them.
Let me give you an example, Bob, because HSUS is such a great example, and you may know this, but I sat down with Josh Balk, the lead of their farm animal team, just a few weeks ago, and we got criticism for it, saying, why are you sitting down with Josh Balk? He's part of HSUS, they're welfarists, they've done all these things that you don't agree with. And the reason I think we need to work with people like Josh Balk, and the reason I think Josh Balk is different from the animal industry, is Josh Balk has spent every waking moment of his life over the past 15 years, every penny of his personal fortune, every minute of his personal time advocating for animals as effective as he can. And while he may
selling cage-free eggs to corporations,
but he might be doing things like that you disagree with.
No, it's not.
Josh Balk and the CEO of Field, Bob.
I'm sorry,
because Josh is someone who genuinely cares about animals and wants to help animals. And frankly, I learned things from Josh Balk too. Josh's perspective is the reason we have to do these incremental measures, and the reason we have to kind of be a little bit secretive about our actual positions. And Josh is a vegan. He believes ultimately in a vegan world. He believes we can't be out there and just say what we really believe. And I'm with you. I'm with you, Bob. I'm with you, Gary, and that we should say what we believe.
No, Wayne, we can't be out there lying, though. We can't be the voices of. We cannot be the voice of animals and be lying. Now let's go on to Mercy.
I think Josh would say it's not lying. It's about strategic communications.
Wayne, anybody who sells cage-free eggs, who sells cage-free eggs is an egg salesman. They're part of the egg industry.
But here's the bigger point, Bob. Can I just make one more point and then I'll pass it on to you? Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So my bigger point is, even if I'm wrong about Josh and Josh is wrong about Josh and HSUS is not a good organization, which I think HSUS does a lot of really good things. I think they do things that are wrong too, and obviously I don't believe in cage-free eggs, but I do think they do good things. But even if I'm wrong about Josh and Josh is wrong about Josh, if we just attack Josh and say that you're as bad as an egg industry salesperson who doesn't care about animals at all he has to do is look into his own heart and realize that's clearly false, because I care about animals immensely. I spent every waking moment of my life over the past 15 years. I spent every penny of my personal fortune. I don't take a dime for the animals. And for the record, since you said this previously, I've not taken a dime from DXC. I'm a net donor to DXC to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars, and I'm still a partner at a law firm. That's how I make my own money. And Josh Balk is exactly the same way. He doesn't take a dime for the animals. He's doing everything he can to fight for
I
animals.
think he's
He
a
can
partner in
immediately see
Hampton Creek, isn't he? He's a partner in Hampton Creek.
He's one of the founders, but he's taken no equity at all in Hampton Creek and has not made a single dime.
Well, if he really cared about the animals, he would educate himself and not be doing what he's doing. Go ahead.
I'm almost done, Bob. If I could just finish this point quickly.
Go ahead.
When Josh believes in his heart and heart and knows in his heart of hearts that he cares about animals, and people tell him he's no different than the egg industry, he's going to feel attacked and shamed. And as someone who's a person of color and someone who honestly did not have a lot of confidence 20 years ago, I'm a very different person than I was 20 years ago. But I remember one of the really formative influences and experiences I had as a student was making mistakes. Going to an economics workshop at the University of Chicago among Nobel Prize winners, saying something that was clearly wrong and stupid, and having an amazing professor by the name of Mark Duggan take me to the side privately afterwards and share with me why my position was wrong. Going to the University of Chicago Law School and having all these, frankly, false beliefs about how animal lawyers can make all these effective changes for animals. And having Gary Francione take me to the side and have personal conversations with me, share with me about a little bit of his work, his book. And I still remember the conversation I had. It was the three of us, Gary. It was another student at the University of Chicago Law School, me and you. And you took us aside and explained to us why you thought, all these welfare campaigns were not effective. And if you had publicly attacked me when I had raised the question at the seminar, then I would not have been willing to talk to you. And similarly, if we publicly attack people like Josh Balk, even if he's wrong, he's not going to listen to us.
Well, he's not in my movement. You see, again, he is in the egg industry, Wayne. When somebody sells eggs on a corporate basis and lies to the public about them, well, he has taken a public position. He's in a position with a public visibility position with the Humane Society of the United States, and if he's doing something to the detriment of animals, he has to be called out on that. So let me go on to Mercy for Animals. Were you done? Can I go on to Mercy for Animals for a second here?
Yeah.
Bob, before you go on to Mercy for Animals, may I make a statement? I want to correct something. Wayne, if you have read my work, you know one thing is clear, and that is I go out of my way to say I'm not making moral judgments about people. Yeah. I don't know what's in their hearts. I don't even remember whether I've ever met Josh Balk. I don't know whether I have or not.
He's a great guy. He'd love to talk to you.
But I don't make moral judgments about these people. I do make judgments about their positions that they take, and I think it is morally obscene to promote cage-free eggs. I think it is actually it's promoting animal exploitation. The fact that you think that it has some strategic, that's like saying, you promote, humane slavery because you think it has some strategic value. If you promote slavery,
that's not my position. That's Josh's position, Gary.
I understand it. But what I'm saying is, what troubles me, and what makes me, what I don't really, I'm not going to engage anymore in this conversation, is this idea that if one takes a position that Josh Balk is not consulting me before he promotes cage-free eggs. He knows my views. He's not promoting me. So if I take the position that I think that cage-free eggs is really is odious, and I think that HSUS or Josh Balk or anybody's promoter, Mercy for Animals or whatever, promotion of these things is really problematic. That's not attacking them. That's not shaming them. That is simply making an argument that the position that they're taking is not morally justified. And to then say, well, if you didn't attack people and you didn't, shame them and you didn't blah, 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 the answer is I'm not. I don't really know what goes on in Josh Balk's heart or in Nathan Runkle's heart or I have no idea what these people think. And I'm not a priest. I'm not a spiritual leader. I'm not really interested in judging them. I am interested in issues of fundamental justice as they affect non-human animals. And as a result, I feel morally obligated to speak out that the entire movement, remember something, Wayne, these are multi-zillion-dollar organizations that have these big advertising campaigns. I'm a professor at Rutgers University. I have no organization. I have no organization whatsoever. I'm just, and I make the arguments. And now all of a sudden, because I make arguments that these people can't deal with, I'm threatening them, I'm shaming them, I'm attacking them. I'm not attacking anybody. I'm making arguments. I don't know what goes on in your heart. I don't know what goes on in Josh Balk's heart. And frankly, that's not my concern. My concern is I want to change the way people think about non-human animals. I want to stop animal exploitation. And the only way that is going to happen is if we have a significant abolitionist vegan movement. And I'm dealing with all of these organizations that say, it's divisive, that's terrible, that's extremist, that's this, that's that. And, and then I got DXE saying, veganism is just basically consumerism and doesn't go far enough. Never even acknowledging that your website does not have a darn thing that says, there are some visions of veganism that are more thoroughgoing, but but the mainstream vegan position doesn't go far enough. That's right, Wayne. But you know what? The mainstream vegan position is promoted by the organizations that you support. Anyway, I'll let you guys go at it. I'm just going to sit back and listen because
my adrenaline, my blood is boiling for a second here, because I do want to continue to be divisive. I do want to separate myself from the animal betrayal specialists who masquerade.
If I could just make one point quickly, though, Bob, Gary, that's a great point. We're going to change the website based on that feedback. I agree with you that we should cite your work. We should say we're talking about the mainstream vegan position. There are abolitionist vegan positions that make veganism, synonymous with activism. That speaking out and standing against injustice is part of the vegan identity for a lot of powerful advocates, including Gary Francione. So I will commit to changing that on the website, or asking our website team to change it, I should say.
Oh.
I'm writing a note to myself right now to do that.
Okay. I'll wait till you're done so you can hear me.
Go ahead, Bob. I'm done.
Okay. I forgot what I was going to say. No, not really. So, Wayne, Mercy for Animals used to oppose cage-free eggs. On its website, it said, "Don't believe the egg industry hype." Mercy for Animals was given millions of dollars by the Open Philanthropy Project to promote cage-free eggs, and now it is the egg industry hype. The Open Philanthropy Project has given the Humane Society of the United States, Mercy for Animals, the Humane League, Animal Equality, there's Compassion in World Farming, all of these groups, millions of dollars to promote cage-free eggs. They are all the egg industry hype, according to Mercy for Animals, when it may have still had a shred of morality and was honest about it. Now we have all of these groups invading California with the Prevent Cruelty Act, gathering signatures to prevent farm animal cruelty. So if you're telling me that grinding up every male chick after birth, after mutilating every female, debeaking her, imprisoning her in harsh confinement with tens of thousands of other birds, and then murdering every single hen is the prevention of cruelty, then where are we at all? This is all deception. It's all these same groups used to oppose enriched battery cages. It used to be on their websites. The battery cages were unacceptable to the physiology and psychology of the birds. And then the Humane Society of the United States entered into a partnership with United Egg Producers, and all of these groups reversed their positions and campaigned for those battery cages. There's not a shred of morality in these groups. Animal Charity Evaluators makes these groups top charities every single year. None of them promotes veganism. They've all run from the word veganism. So what I'm saying is that you and the public have been duped into thinking that the industry is actually an animal rights movement. It is really a group of animal betrayal specialists masquerading as an animal movement, and DXE should be protesting against them as it does against anybody else.
Well, for all the money that you say the Open Philanthropy Project and HSUS has, it's tiny compared to what Cal-Maine has, to what JS West has, to what Smithfield has. And I agree with you in many regards, Bob, that cage-free eggs are not the solution, that they're not humane. And frankly, I think most of the folks at HSUS would say the same. When I've talked to Josh Balk and Wayne Pacelli about cage-free eggs, they're quite clear about it too, that cage-free eggs are not humane. That
it's their main campaign. They don't save one life. They don't save anybody.
They say is if we're going to get to a world where animals are not hurt at all, we believe that cage-free eggs are a good incremental step. Now, you may disagree with that. I may disagree with that. But that doesn't mean they're bad people, and it doesn't mean they're the same as the egg industry.
It's not a question of whether they're bad people, Wayne. Do you think that position is morally justifiable? Do you think it's morally justifiable? Wayne, do you think it's morally justifiable?
I absolutely do not think it's morally justifiable to exploit any animal. But when we say that there is no difference between Josh Balk, a good person who spends all of his waking hours fighting for animals, and the egg industry, which is profiting off the exploitation of animals.
Well, they are too. They're profiting off of the.
But by implication, what you're saying is that these people have the same intent.
They do.
I think we have to care.
So let me go back to Paul Souther.
Be strategic. If I could just finish my point, if that's all right, folks.
Go ahead.
It's totally appropriate to say strategically, tactically. I think this tactic is counterproductive. But when
Let's
we demonize
kill all the animals, it's a tactically productive strategy. Let's kill them all and torture them all and imprison them all, right? And tell the public it's good.
By imposing these sorts of protective measures, we'll increase the costs for eggs. More and more people will go vegan.
Wait, what protective measures? What's the protective measure?
Now, I'm offering Josh's argument, not because I believe in it, because I don't. And I've talked to Josh directly about this. I've talked to Louis Ballard about this. I think Louis Ballard is making a big mistake. Louis Ballard is the program officer for the Open Philanthropy Project. He's the one who funds all these groups with cage-free eggs. He knows. I've investigated so many cage-free farms. I know. I mean, Gary, you've made the very insightful point that as long as animals are commodified, you don't even have to do the investigation. You know they're going to be abused because commodification itself is a form of abuse. So Louis knows that this is the case, but he believes over the long term, the way for us to get to a point where these animals are not commodified is to chip away at these sorts of welfare programs. Now, again, you don't have to agree with that. I don't have to agree with that. In fact, we probably don't agree with that. But demonizing them, saying they're equivalent to the egg industry is very, very different.
When you sell eggs, Wayne, you sell eggs, you are in the egg industry. I'm sorry. I mean, how can we be so duped? If you sell eggs, you're in the egg industry. Now, let me just go back to one second here. Wayne. So on the same Diane Rehm show, I referred to it before, where the chairman of the egg board said that Meat Free Monday has been a bonanza for the sales of eggs. He also said, when HSUS has a client who wants cage-free eggs, we supply them. So, come on. They're all tied in with the egg industry, with United Egg Producers. This is their. How can you justify the lies that cover this up? How can you justify a happy face on cage-free eggs? That is that's an obscenity, right there.
Yeah, we can't, Bob, which is why we challenge it. But we have to understand that a lot of the folks who are doing these programs, they're being duped by the industry. When the industry says our eggs are cage-free or our turkey is free range, I've talked to these folks. They're shocked by the findings of our investigations. We went to Diesel Turkey Ranch and found out that none of those turkeys were ever stepping outside even a day of their lives. The folks at HSUS were shocked by it, and they wanted to create change too. So we have to give these folks the benefit of the doubt that they believe.
Why?
That
I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
I think we should give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I think we should give an egg industry CEO the benefit of the doubt. And when I talk to the Costco CEO, when I talk to John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, who hates my guts, he every time I send him an email, he does write back to me, but he always says nasty things, and he's not willing to talk to me. But I still give him the benefit of the doubt because in every human being's heart, I believe this as a Buddhist, I believe this as an animal. Who has the capacity to empathize and believes other animals have the capacity to empathize too, that everybody wants to do the right thing. And if we don't believe in people, they're not going to change. So I think we should come at this when there are strategic and ethical disagreements within the movement, but even outside of the movement, come at it from a perspective where we believe in people, and when we believe in people, they'll change.
Again, Wayne, I don't accept that they're the animal rights movement. I believe that they are the egg
even
industry.
If they're not,
this is egg industry infiltration of an animal rights movement.
So you're making a very important sociological and strategic point, which is that co-optation is a danger to the movement. And there's extensive sociological research about this. And I've read this. I know Gary's read this, that whether it's the fair trade movement, the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, corporations have done a very good job of strategically infiltrating movements to try and undermine them. So I agree that's a concern. And anytime money is changing hands, we should be transparent about that. So when Humane Society and Mercy for Animals is getting money from a big corporate donor, they should be transparent about that. But at the end of the day, the reality is most of these people are taking this money because they believe that it's going to be effectively used for animals. And while there's a lot to be said about money,
but Mercy for Animals said cage-free eggs are egg industry hype. Why did they take the money then?
One point: if you look at the history of social justice, while fundraising is not fun, and for most of my career as an activist, I have not raised a dime. You do have to pay the bills somehow, and you do have to pay people's salaries. You have to take animals out of these horrendous places and give them veterinary care. And every social justice movement in history has succeeded partly because they've been able to raise some limited amount of resources. We don't have to fight the battle dollar for dollar. I mean, Smithfield is a $14 billion company. We're never going to raise $14 billion for animals. But we do need a small amount of funds to fund our most important campaigns and objectives, to pay for the vegan literature that Gary believes in, to pay for the videos that we want to show people in the public, to pay for the books.
Well, I'm a nonprofit that can hardly pay for the phone, to tell you the truth. So,
gentlemen, I'm not going to.
People should be supporting you, but we do have to do some limited amount of fundraising. And the fact that HSUS and Mercy for Animals take some amount of funds to do their advocacy is, in my view, not a reason to tarnish them.
To do obscene advocacy.
You need to pay the bills, Bob. If you were to do some fundraising and raise some monies to have this radio program continue, I would not want to tarnish you on that basis.
Well, if I supported cage-free eggs, I would deserve to be tarnished. If the Open Philanthropy Project came to me and said, "We'll give you $1 million," like they did to Mercy for Animals, which was opposed to cage-free eggs, if it came to me with $1 million check, I would have to rip it up. I mean, like where do we draw the line here? I mean, it's really.
I think MFA's position is that cage-free eggs are wrong. They're not humane, but they're progress. So it's not that they're trying to sell cage-free eggs. It's that they don't see the universe of possibility out there. And so we have to expand that universe of possibility. We have to show the Mercy for Animals of the world that you can be an advocate for all animals, that you don't have to accept the industry lies. But if we don't do that...
When the industry lies come from the animal advocates, though, then we're in trouble.
Gentlemen, it's 7:37, and I have someplace to be at 8 p.m., and I'm going to probably be late anyway. I didn't realize it was going to go this long. I just want to thank you both for hosting this. I'm happy to continue this at some later time. I just want to say one final thing, Wayne, and that is I certainly agree and have said that, most people think that what they're doing is the right thing. Most people don't think that they're bad or that they're doing things which are morally wrong. People talk themselves into things. They justify things in various ways. I believe animal exploitation is wrong. I do not think that animal advocates should be promoting it. I think that it is morally wrong, and I also think it is absurd to believe that we are going to, by making animal exploitation supposedly more humane, that we are going to eliminate animal exploitation. What the history of the animal welfare movement going back to the 19th century has taught us is that the more people become comfortable with animal exploitation, the more animal exploitation actually increases. So I think that, I mean, I'm sure that Josh Balk, and I know Wayne Pissell personally. I've known him for many years, and I'm sure that these folks all believe that, what they're doing is right. And I'm sure that they have sincere beliefs, and I sincerely believe that they're very wrong. And I believe that not only do I think that do I sincerely believe that they're wrong, but I believe as an advocate for justice for non-humans, I have an obligation to say why they're wrong. If they take that as shaming or reasons to be frightened of me or whatever, I'm really sorry. But and when you talk about what we could do if we all put ourselves into creative, nonviolent, vegan advocacy, many people, not everybody, but many people really do care morally about animals. And what we've done is create a movement in which we have told them that if they avoid things like fur, or they buy cage-free eggs, or they buy crate-free pork or whatever, they can discharge their moral obligations to animals. That's absurd. That's wrong. It's morally wrong. And we're never going to, as a practical matter, get anywhere with that sort of position. So, I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. You made the point about, you got to bring in some money. And the answer is any dollar brought in by exploiting animals is an ill-gotten gain, in my judgment. I don't care whether you got to pay the bills. If you're bringing in money by selling out animal interests, that's really problematic. I want to thank you both extremely, very much. It's been an interesting discussion. And I hope that I wish you both well. And Bob, I will be talking with you. And Wayne, I'm more than happy to continue this discussion at some point. But I also think that I've been doing this for 35 years. My arguments have been out there I've been making these arguments. I've been talking to people for 35 years. And you know what? I actually, if I did not hit it, I believe that that the movement has been hijacked. I think it's become a business, and that's not to say that I think that these people are bad people. I just think it's become a business, and I think that when you are in the business of raising funds, you compromise. It's inevitable. It's not just the animal movement. It's happened in other movements as well, but it's been a real problem with the animal movement. The animal movement has really lost. It really lost its way in the 1990s, and it's not only lost its way, but it's getting more and more lost as every year goes by.
More and more harmful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I want to thank you both very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to discussing these issues in the future. But I really do have to go because
okay,
I didn't.
Can you stay like one more minute, and we'll just hear Wayne.
Sure,
Wayne.
I can stay 4 more minutes.
Wayne would like to say something in conclusion,
Yeah,
I guess.
wanna...
You're hanging up may disconnect us all. So
okay.
Let's see what happens if Wayne has some a final thought here.
So my final thought is just to thank you, Gary, for the work you've done over those 35 years and changing the minds of many people, including me today. And I hope you just give everyone else in the animal rights movement the same benefit of the doubt. The next time you're in the Bay Area, or even if you aren't in the Bay Area, I'd love to have you come personally speak at the Berkeley Animal Rights Center and share some of your critiques of DXC. I think all of us would really cherish that opportunity. And then I hope the next time in the Northeast, I'll hit you up again and see if you're willing to sit down personally too. Because, I actually don't think we've actually been in the same room together since 2003, 2004, and I'd love to just reconnect because I've learned immensely from all the work you've done. And while there's some differences, I think at the end of the day, we have so much more in common than we disagree on, and it's important to point that out and emphasize that too.
Well, we'll talk about that, Wayne, but thank you very much for your kind words, and thank you, Bob.
Okay, thank you, Gary, and thank you, Wayne. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Bob. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Thank you.